All right, this is jpeg2RAW, show number 76, recorded on March 12th, 2013. And tonight it's Tim and I with Michael, how do you pronounce it?
Bollino.
So, you know, I always mispronounce people's last names, but with Michael I did something really special. I misspelled it. It's not that hard. It's, you know, Bollino, Tim.
Yeah.
So in his case, I forgot one of the L's in one of the things I did. So not only can I mispronounce them, but I can also misspell them. So hopefully I got it right now, Michael.
You did. You fixed it. Thanks.
Before we get into Michael's shots, I want to talk a little about a few things on the group. First, I posted this in a Facebook group, Tim. Georgia back maybe a few months ago passed a law. It's a new tax law, and you know, we don't get into tax law. My other job is an accountant, but I don't want to get into too much accounting tech here. But the law basically was called the Amazon tax. Basically, if you're an affiliate located in Georgia, the company who's using you as an affiliate has to charge sales tax. So Adorama, which was one of our 3 affiliates, we had Newegg, we had Adorama, and we had Amazon. One of the 3 affiliates at Adorama decided to not do business in Georgia with affiliates, so we have lost that affiliate link. So if you know, you'll start to see it disappear from our website, and that's just because we don't have that there. I still like Adorama. I still will buy stuff from there. You know, it's nothing personal. It's just, you know, those things happen. Hopefully, something will happen long term to change that, and hopefully, we don't lose Amazon.
I'll tell you, I mean, Amazon, I've been paying tax for Amazon. I think I put it on the Facebook page for about at least 2 or 3 years now up here in New York. They've went to it, which really stinks.
Yeah.
The only good thing is the prices are better than other places still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we did pick up a new affiliate, though. So, you know, one of the place where our site is hosted at, and the place I've been with them since 2005 is DreamHost. It's a little bit different from anything we've done before. And this is, if you got your own website, if you're not using WordPress.org or anything like that, if you want to run your own WordPress site, one of the hosting services that you can use is DreamHost. It's one I use, DreamHost. I have both a VPS, which is a virtual private server, and a regular shared hosting service. The shared hosting service is pretty cheap, like $8.95 a month. Is, you know, for unlimited bandwidth, unlimited storage. It's a pretty good solution if you want to roll your own website. You know, it's pretty easy to install WordPress and maintain that. So if you want to go that route, that is a a pretty good choice to do that. If you do go that route, if you do want to use DreamHost, make sure you use our link on our website. We will start to see that more in places. It's here in the live show, and it's at the bottom of the page. So you can use that, and the show gets a little bit of credit for that. Also, we have the March photo challenge is started. Michael, I don't know if you know this, but we do a photo challenge in our Facebook group every month. It's a way to encourage people to get out and shoot. February was Emotion. And one of our admins, Gina Perry, won that, and she also won a book from Nicole Young. Nicole's so we're going to ship that out to her. And then like I think I mentioned this, the March photo challenge is signs, and you know, however you want to interpret that. Most people are taking photos of signs, which is fine. You know, however you interpret that, whatever you want to do there. It's a fun way. You know, people are getting on. When you first heard of signs, you're thinking, okay, you're gonna have stop signs, yield signs, but people are getting very creative in their signs, and that's what you want to see.
Yeah,
is get creative. Also, I mentioned, what's that? Oh, sorry. I wanted to mention, or last time I mentioned the fact that we had listeners from Afghanistan, Tim.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
it's got to be somebody in the military.
Yeah, so I started looking at what other countries, and I don't want to say, you know, I don't know the countries outside of the ones I would normally think would listen to us, like Canada, you know, England, America, of course, and Australia. We have a lot of listeners in all those places. But some of the other countries, you know, so you got New Zealand. We got 3 listeners in New Zealand, a listener in Norway.
Maybe Trey Ratcliffe is listening to us.
Yeah, a listener in Norway. 3 listeners in Afghanistan.
Wow.
7 listeners in the Ukraine.
Wow.
And then 3, and speaking of not being able to pronounce this name, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this name. Grizzly. It's a small island somewhere around England, off the England coast, I think, or French coast. A small island out there. If you are in any of these countries, if you're outside of America, let's say, I'd love to hear from everybody. But I'd really like to hear from anybody in Afghanistan, Norway, New Zealand, Grizzly, and you can tell me how I mispronounced that, or the Ukraine. That would be awesome to hear from one of you guys. If send us an email at podcast@jpeg2RAW.com and let us know you're listening from one of those states. That would be.
Or if you're in chat right now, that would be pretty cool.
That would be amazing if you are.
Except it's probably about 4 in the morning over in some of those countries.
It is. It is. So if you're not able to listen live, and if you're listening to this recorded, you already have a way to get it. But our Stitcher audience, Tim, is continuing to grow, and
amazing. That's just amazing.
You would think that iTunes would be and I think it still is. iTunes is still our biggest listener base because we are going to be talking about some of Michael's photos. We are a photography show, but the audio part of the show, the audio listeners, still far outpace the video listeners. And Stitcher is a great place to get that. So if you can't listen live, and we'd love to have you here live, but if you can't listen live, we got Stitcher, Zune, BlackBerry, YouTube, iTunes, of course, and in other places. If I've missed a place that you want me to get it to, let me know and I'll get it there. If you do have iTunes on your computer, I'd like to ask a favor for you, and that is, even if you don't subscribe through iTunes, but you at least have it on your computer, find the show and leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us go up in the rankings.
Now, does that matter which one of the large or the small? Does it?
So we have, and that's a good point, Tim, because we have 3 feeds. We have the audio feed, we have a video large and video small on iTunes. Most other places it's just one feed. YouTube is one video feed. Stitcher's one audio feed. So it'd probably be helpful if you consolidated all those comments into one of the feeds rather than split them out amongst all of them. Or if you want to do all of them, that's fine. But if you're only going to do one, do the audio feed. That one has the most comments already, so it'd be nice to build that one up. And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, so you want to get into some of these photo challenges, just go to facebook.com/groups/jpeg2RAW and join our group. We're over 700 strong now, growing every week, and we'd love to have you in the group. I think that's all I had on my checklist here. Yep. All right, so tonight, Tim here, probably not in the case where you live. Michael, I don't know where you live, and probably a lot of our listeners, this is not the case. But here in Georgia, spring is here. I'm actually a little warm in here now. I got these 2 computers that are kicking up a lot of heat during the broadcast, and it's getting up into the high 60s during the day. So I love this time of year. Spring and fall, my 2 absolute favorite times of the year.
Yeah.
And it made me think, I guess last week was really the kickoff of our spring season. But, I often think when spring and fall come around, the first thing I want to do is get a landscape photographer to come out here. Who can I have come out here and talk to us about landscape photography? Because that's one of my passions is landscape. And I've been following our guest tonight for quite a while on Google+, and he has some amazing images. And I want to introduce Michael Bollino?
Bollino, you got it.
Ah, awesome.
Perfect.
So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into photography?
Sure. Well, pretty much, I guess the real reason, or the first, when I first got into photography dates back to college. So, I'm originally from Maryland, so suburban Maryland between DC and Annapolis, and, I didn't really do too many natural activities like hiking or whatnot. But when I got to college, I met a guy who was pretty much into climbing and mountaineering and backpacking. He had been on a Knowles semester course for 3 months, and then I met this guy. We became fast friends, and so we began doing these trips. And we did after freshman year of college, we took a trip out to Colorado and Wyoming and just did some climbing and backpacking. And then for every break, pretty much spring break or winter break, through college, we would either go to New Hampshire or Maine or somewhere else and do some just general mountaineering or some ice climbing and things like that. And so I quickly developed this really strong passion for being the outside, into the outdoors. And so, of course, one thing I did is brought a camera, just like a lot of people go into the outdoors. So I started taking pictures, and when I get back home to Maryland, these pictures became these strong reminders of this experience, right? Mm-hmm. And so over time, I really started really enjoy certain aspects of the photography. So I had these different albums for different trips, and they were really special to me. So I moved out west to Oregon, which is an amazing place to be. It's beautiful. We have the rainforest, we have the Columbia River Gorge, we have the Cascade Mountains, and the ocean, of course, the coast. And I continued doing some climbing, the volcanoes here, and I continued backpacking into these amazing areas and bringing home these pictures. So over time, this kind of curiosity crept in. So what can I do to kind of make these pictures better? Because, of course, having a little point and shoot, you're snapping the picture, it never really translates what it was like to be there in person. So I became curious, and I started reading more, and I picked my first film SLR right before going to Nepal. So I think it was in 2000. That was my first trip to the Himalayas. And so I decided it was time to kind of invest in some camera gear, which was going to hopefully capture some better images, or ones that maybe will start approaching what I kind of saw. And so I got a Nikon N8008 and a couple kit lenses. And there's a guy, of course, named Galen Rao, who's a famous climber and a very famous photographer. And I picked up a copy of one of his books. I believe it's, I think it's The Inner Game of Outdoor Photography or Mountain Light. But whatever the book is, where he has a picture on one side and then a description of what was going on behind the scenes, to kind of what went into capturing the picture, whether it be using a graduated neutral density filter, or what settings he was using, or why he had his foreground element there. And I kind of devoured the book before going to Nepal, and I kind of picked up some just general rules of composition, as well as some kind of mantras, such as exposing for your most important highlight. So I kind of went to Nepal and went through the Himalayas, did 2 big treks in the course of 3 months, and lost a bunch of weight, and it was just a phenomenal time. I mean, really life-altering experience going to Nepal by myself.
By yourself?
By myself, yeah. So, and here's the thing, before that I went to a couple border towns in Mexico, and that was it. So I hopped on this plane, I flew to Nepal, and I re-landed in Kathmandu at midnight because the plane was late. So here I am in this taxi cab, bouncing through Kathmandu, which is a phenomenal city. It's so polluted, but so fascinating at the same time, and just an amazing experience. So I went to Nepal and brought back these photos, and of course I was really happy with them. And that's what really sparked my desire to learn more and more and more. And that was really before digital was around. So over the next 3 or 4 years, I started taking some pictures. Of course, I didn't really take a ton because film was expensive and processing was expensive, and I didn't have my own a lot of funds to kind of go out and just waste as much as I can and shoot as much as I can. So I was pretty judicious with what I shot or when I shot, but I collected some different slides and from some different 35mm film negatives from all my trips. So if I would climb a mountain, I'd bring the camera. And then it wasn't really until the mid-2000s where I picked up a digital SLR. And of course, that feedback loop where you can erase, you can retake, you get that constant feedback. And I think that's where it really took off from there.
What was your first digital SLR?
It was a Nikon D50.
D50, okay.
D50, yeah. And then I graduated to the D300 pretty quickly after that. And I stuck with the D300 for a while, waiting for the D700 successor to come along, which they finally did. And now I'm shooting with the D800E, which is a fantastic camera.
Yeah, I want to come around to the D800 at some point. But so at the time when you went to Nepal, were you married at the time?
No, wasn't married.
You know, I guess this maybe is my own fear, but I haven't traveled abroad very much. Were you afraid traveling to, have you been to Nepal before?
Nope, not before 2000. But I went back in 2003, and I went back to Tibet in 2007. I also spent a year in South America, living in Chile for about 8 or 9 months, and then traveling down to Patagonia and then back through Bolivia and Peru. So, yeah.
So did you know anybody down there? Are you born and raised in America?
Born and raised, yeah.
Did you know anybody down there?
In Chile?
Yeah.
No, my wife's a speech pathologist, so she got a job doing her chosen profession down in Santiago.
Okay.
And I just taught English on the side, very part-time. And before working and then after working, we traveled, and we did a little bit of climbing as well down there, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome being able to travel down there. But That takes some guts to go to a foreign country. Did you know where you were going to sleep each night?
In
Nepal.
in Nepal?
Yeah.
In Kathmandu, yeah. I mean, in Kathmandu, it's a big tourist section called Samel, and there's tons and tons of very cheap hotels. When trekking, there's different villages along the way, and they have tea houses. And so no tent, no stove. I would just kind of trek to the next village. There's a tea house, and you can order food there and sleep under a roof. And it's pretty, at least in the trekking regions where I went, which are the main ones, which is the Everest region and then the Annapurna region. Okay. So it's pretty easy.
And you were doing it all by yourself. Do you normally like to travel and take landscape photos by yourself?
It's really interesting. Like up until the last year and a half or so, I was pretty much a lone wolf out there. In the Northwest, there's a lot of nature and landscape photographers. It's just a region which is ripe for people to get into it. It's just a beautiful area. And so occasionally I'd wave and chat to these guys, but I would never go out purposely to shoot with somebody. But recently, in the last year and a half, I started kind of making more connections and shooting with other people. And one reason is because that's a great way of just kind of bouncing ideas off of people and gaining little tips here and there. It's a great way of progressing. And for a long time, it was just by myself. And I'd go out and I would just kind of learn via just kind of internet sources or via just trial and error or just looking at other people's photography and saying, wow, I wonder how they did that. And so I kind of pieced things together pretty quickly and would go out by myself. In a lot of ways, shooting by myself, I do prefer. In a lot of these areas, when you go in there, there's really only a limited space. So if you go with more than two guys or two girls, wherever it may be, you're kind of then shoulder to shoulder. You are kind of waiting for them to finish so you can get back in there. And you pretty much have a lot of the same comps. There's obviously variations. You can get creative and look for different angles and things like that. But there was one time last summer we were on Mount Rainier, and Mount Rainier has a great bloom, wildflower bloom in August, early August each year. And we were there, and there was probably 10 or 12 photographers, and probably 8 of us were lined up. And I think over time, people have posted variations of the same sort of scene, which is kind of fun. It's actually really fun to kind of talk to these people who some of them I've met before, others were new acquaintances, and that was really great. But shooting by myself, I feel like I can really get into it. I really kind of close into myself and just kind of holding a casual conversation while shooting is something I just can't do. It's just that engrossing. I need to kind of really concentrate and I kind of get sucked into what I'm doing behind the camera. And so, yes, I like shooting with people, but there's also some drawbacks as well.
Yeah, for me, I guess for me personally, when I go out to shoot, I don't know if I'm going to be there. If I'm doing early morning, I like to get there early, maybe an hour or so before sunrise, and then you stay, and then you may decide to stay longer. And I know if I were to take my wife, anybody, maybe anybody, even if I'd go to shoot with you, Michael, I would feel, even if you didn't mean to, and it was really no issue, I would feel pressure that either you wanted to stay or you wanted to leave.
Right, you'd feel you're inconveniencing them to your schedule.
So I would feel, that's, for me, landscape photography is a solo event because I want to feel stress-free. And even if you're not doing anything, it's self-induced stress, let's say that.
Right, I agree.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's important to kind of have common goals. So, like, a lot of times with guys that shoot, we pretty much have a common goal. If it's a sunset or sunrise shot, you pretty much have its finite period of time where you think the light's good or it could be good, and then once the show's over, you can pack up and go home. Creeks and things like that, or the Northwest Forest, and a cloudy day in the spring where it's just the spring green is just glowing, it's just absolutely amazing in there. You can really shoot all day long, and that's where it gets to be more. And a lot of times we meet up out there, so someone can peel off and go back home, others can stay, or even kind of diverge itineraries and say, I'm going to go to this spot while you stay here and shoot. It hasn't been a big issue, actually.
That's true. I guess if you meet like that, that's fine.
Yeah.
Now, do you prefer morning light, evening light, or you do both?
Morning I prefer for a couple of different reasons. I love watching just the kind of, you go from blackness or maybe very twilightish light levels up through the morning, just kind of waking up, and you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes clouds appear and things come out of the woodwork that you don't really notice in the dark. and then you kind of feel like you're alive and you're awake, and you can kind of continue on. So I do prefer the morning light. It may be, I'm not sure if it's psychological, the light seems nicer then. I'm not sure, but I do prefer the morning light,
now,
for sure.
From what I understand, you're like the first guy there for the sunrise.
It's funny. So you can ask some of my buddies. This last year, I probably I find myself running down the trail for sunset, not sunrise. I'm usually better at sunrise, but at sunset, because I have a wife and kid, a lot of times we're camping together, and I don't want to leave those guys alone too long, so I kind of try to time it perfectly before I start driving to the location, so I can then hike out to the location. And what happens is, inevitably, I'm running behind schedule. I can see the lights starting to get really good. I have to kind of hike a couple miles or a mile down the trail to get to where I want to be, and I'm just running and sweating. And sometimes if I meet people out there, I'm usually the last person there. But
when you come on scene, you're real quiet. You don't disturb anybody.
Yeah. I try to be.
That's an inside joke. I thought you scared the crap out of somebody.
I did. Oh, Ryan Dyer?
Yes.
Yeah. So Ryan. I'm not sure if anyone. I think a lot of people know Ryan Dyer, but his work is fantastic. If you haven't heard of him, he is just a phenomenal photographer. He lives up in Washington, kind of close to Portland, and he has probably the greatest collection of amazing work from Glacier National Park. The guy is amazing, and so I was out in Glacier last summer, and so was he, and we're going to meet up and shoot near Logan Pass, and he was with his girlfriend at the time, and they were kind of on the trail, and they're kind of going up this little section of rock, and I saw him there, and I knew it was Ryan, of course, and this on Logan Pass, there's probably not a ton of grizzlies, but it's glacier, and there's grizzlies everywhere, so you kind of be aware. And so his back was to me. He's very he's helping his girlfriend make that last little step up. He's reaching down his hand and kind of made my best bear imitation, and he kind of jumped pretty hard, and thank God he didn't go back over the cliff or turn around and spray me with some mace or bear mace. So but he was a good sense of humor about it, I guess. So,
very good. Yeah, I was reading about that earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so now morning and evening light. What do you do during the day? So for a landscape photographer, I guess during the day, some of the shots we shown earlier, and I don't know, are you able to see the shots I'm showing?
I can't see any work that's being shown now.
Okay, so if you need to go to the live page to be able to see what we're showing, and when you go there, you are going to get it. You need to mute it as soon as you can, or else we'll get a little bit of feedback. But I've been doing some of the photos as we've been talking here. And I guess, depending on where you're at, what you can do during the middle of the day, because, a lot of photographers, landscape photographers, only like that evening and morning light, is some of your scenes where you're in a forest and you've got the trees inside the forest where you can shoot pretty much all day, I guess.
With the right, if you have clouds, you can shoot for a long time during the day. Mm-hmm. I still try to maybe avoid kind of the middle part of the day, but you can really shoot all day long.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that's really nice about here in the Northwest. There's the Columbia River Gorge, which is 40 minutes from Portland, Oregon. I can get out there pretty quickly. In the spring, starting in mid-May through mid-June, July, of course, it gets really, really green. It's an amazing place. It's kind of unreal how green and lush that place can be. But at that time of year, we're still getting a lot of cloud cover. So it's pretty easy to pick a day and go out, and you have a lot of time to shoot. And so you can really visit a couple of different areas in the gorge within a day and really not be too worried about the light changing too much or not. What you really want is just to have this nice, I like night days that have kind of like the clouds appear kind of bright and white without too much really strong sunlight coming down to produce shadows within the forest. So kind of like a glow box, a light box up there to kind of help even out the scene. And it's to me, in some ways, shooting in the gorge is the low-hanging fruit of nature photography and landscape photography, because if you pick a day like that and you know where you want to go, it's I don't want to say it's easier to bring back something that's really good, but it's less. You're not apt to go out and get nothing, so you're going to get something you can bring back. Whereas if you go to someplace for a sunrise in a grand landscape, like a mountain landscape, and you're really counting on some dramatic light or some sort of really nice lighting to occur, you get skunked a lot, and I go through droughts where I get skunked a lot, and I come back and I may not have shot anything that day. I maybe not have brought my camera out of the back.
Really?
Going to the gorge, I would I'll shoot images a lot, almost every trip in.
So that's a question I had, is how much of your trips, how much scouting do you do for locations? Because I imagine because I think I read somewhere that you're about to go on you are booking a trip to go somewhere. Yeah. And, you know, I imagine around your home, you pretty much know most of the shots. But when you're traveling to another location, and you're going to be there a limited amount of time, how do you know where to go?
Really good look. I'm about to go down to the southwest I'm going to fly to Las Vegas and spend some time in a place called Valley Fire State Park. And I'm trying to decide where else to go. It could be the Page, Arizona area, or maybe up to Zion. So that's what's kind of good about the social network, is I have a couple friends who know this area very well.
Okay.
So I'm contacting them and saying, hey, I'm going to be there. Do you think, what about these different areas? Are they in condition? Or do you have any other suggestions about where to go? And they won't be there to kind of scout out for me in terms of what my comp may be. And I really don't want to go and just copy any comp that they have. But in terms of conditions and what looks to be really good, the social aspect of Facebook or Google Plus or wherever it may be is a pretty good tool to use. Scouting out, I wish I need to do more scouting. Like I said, sometimes I arrive to the scene pretty late. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to balance, having a family and being in the outdoors, which isn't always the case, but on these trips it will be, because we do go as a family. So hanging with my son and helping my wife just kind of around whatever camp. So I try to balance the family aspect of these trips with the photography. And in some ways it does impede some of my scouting, and it kind of maybe scales back some of the ambition I can do in terms of where I want to get to, or backpacking, or even driving on some of these crazy four-wheel roads out in Utah to get to these really stellar locations. But that's fine. I've accepted that. That's totally fine by me. In terms of scouting a comp, that's something that I want to really kind of do more. I want to get there earlier so that I know what I want, or have good ideas of different things that I want.
Yeah, and you're working a full-time job in addition to family. You got a full-time job, and I fight some of the same things. I love to start, and I have done some of this. For the weekend, let's say all day Saturday, I'm driving in North Georgia mountains looking for my various spots. I carry around my phone, so I may get out of the truck very little during that trip, because I'm going during the middle of the day for whatever reason, and I'm taking shots with my phone to get the GPS tag that I can later put it in Lightroom. But that trip may take all day long. I may leave early in the morning and not get back till late at night. And when you work during the week, that's one day out of your 2 days as a family.
Yeah. Definitely. And so I pick and choose. So really, I look at weather forecasts, and I look at things just to kind of pick and choose days that seem to be pretty prime for getting out. A lot of times, it may be a month between trips, and in the winter here, it's really gray. Sometimes there's not sunlight on the weekend, so I need to have this alignment of good light, a good amount of cloud cover, or the right amount of cloud cover, meaning not super cloudy or not too few clouds. And I try to pick those days and head out on the weekend. And so sometimes there will be several weekends in a row where I don't have to worry about trying to steal away time to get out there. So it kind of works out in the end, but having a job definitely makes me, like other photographers, have to really focus on the weekends.
Sure.
It's a couple of guys who work from home who can get out in the morning and then do their work after they get back for a shoot, which is really great. My hours are pretty rigid, so I have to kind of really work around
mine too.
My schedule. So
you know how many times I'm driving. It seems like maybe this is just the nature of things, and it's maybe in my mind. But it seems like the times when I'm getting ready to go to work and I got a meeting in the morning, there's no way I can be late. It's like the fog rolls in. It's like, oh, I'd love to go out and shoot. I know the locations I want to go. I'd love to go out and shoot. And man, if this is just, I hope we get this on a weekend. Weekend rolls around and it's not, it's all gone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, I can bike to work. I have about a 6-mile bike ride to work. So several days a week I bike, not every day. But, there's been so many amazing sunrises I've seen on my bike. I'm being like, I hope somebody's out there getting this, because it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm kind of like, God, I wish I had the flexibility, kind of like, at least make an attempt at it to see if the light gets good that morning. But that's just how it goes. I've accepted it.
Well, one of the good things about spring coming along is daylight saving. Is it saving or savings?
Saving. Saving.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, and then I questioned myself. Daylight saving time. Now, when I get home, it's still daylight, so I have a chance to come home, change real quick, get my camera, head out, and get some sunset photos.
Yeah.
Which is fun. Are you able to see the live chat yet?
Yeah, is it on Google Plus or where is that?
No, I'm sorry. It's jpeg2RAW.com
Okay,
/live.
log into that real fast.
I got a few photos I want to ask you a question about.
The shot you got up there is one of my favorite.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for that, I just want to mention to everybody watching, and if you're a regular listener, you know what I'm going to say, is the photos that I'm showing are reduced quality. To see the full quality of Michael's shots, you really got to go out to his website, and we'll give you the links to all that, or his Google Plus page.
So that photo? Okay.
Yeah,
I can see it now. I can see it now.
Yeah, so you're seeing a reduced quality here, of course, but even in this reduced quality, you can see blue is my favorite color. So this one, I like this one right off the bat, but I love of course the night sky where you got the stars in there, and what is that? Some kind of
It's just so the location is the Alvord Desert in southeast Oregon, and it's kind of like this little part of Oregon which is more similar to Nevada. So it has this particular, it's called a playa, so it's a dried old lake bed, and so you have this really these geometric patterns that form, and they kind of vary. So as you drive around the lake bed, you can get different patterns there. And in certain sections of the lake bed, there's these old branches that are just kind of sticking out of the lake bed, probably from when it was wet and supported plant life, I'm assuming. And so this guy was just hanging out there, and I shot it, and it was a very dark night. Down in that part of Oregon, it probably has some of the darkest skies probably, I would say, almost anywhere. It's pretty remote. There's a couple little smaller towns around, but they're pretty far away. So when you get a moonless night, it's really, really a great spot for some star photography.
Yeah, I wouldn't get that star photography up here in Long Island.
No. And now the blue color, did you do that in post-processing?
Yeah, so basically it's a choice in post-processing because it's pretty much night. And it is very close to being night. The first exposure was taken when there's some light in the sky. So that wasn't taken, it was probably taken about an hour apart, which is something that you can do to kind of help with bring out details in the landscape of a shot. But the blue was kind of a choice in post-process, just a creative choice. I just cooled down the white balance, and because I feel like blue signifies night a lot better than warm does, of course. So just a creative choice.
Okay, and did you say the shots were an hour apart, so it's 2 exposures?
I would have to go back to the file data, but about an hour apart. One for the foreground in the hills, and then one for the sky itself.
Okay. And
so it's a technique that people are using more and more and more. It's not super uncommon to use, where you're taking a shot during the twilight, about 45 minutes after sunset. That's going to give you an exposure which will render the scene, the land scene, without too much noise or anything else like that, or without having to use light painting through LED flashlights or something like that. So this is all just natural light from the twilight time of day, and then you'll wait until you feel like the Milky Way or the stars are out sufficiently to take the second exposure. It could have been more. I have to go back into the data and see, but it was, an hour to 2 hours apart, I'd say.
Do you remember any of the settings, like how long the exposure in general?
Yeah. Good question. So the setting for the stars is you really want to get them less than 30 seconds or less. If you go beyond 30 seconds, you'll start seeing some trailing in the sky.
Okay.
And I have done some star photography. I'm not nearly an expert, but I was at ISO 3200 for 30 seconds, and I'm using a 16 to 35 f4. So I use my widest aperture, which is f4. I would love to have an f2.8, which would give you that much more light collecting ability.
Yeah.
And so what you generally want to do is you want to use your widest aperture. You want to use, you want to go as high as you can in ISO without it being too noisy or the image quality is too degraded, and you want to stick within 30 seconds. The great thing with the D800E is I can underexpose a little bit, which will cut down on my exposure time, and I can bring it back up in post. And the shadow noise in the D800E is phenomenal. So a lot of cameras, even some higher level cameras, will have a lot of noisy areas in the shadows. With the D800E, you can kind of really recover those shadows, or even bump up exposure and processing without really introducing a lot of noise. And so that's one of the greatest benefits of the D800E in my book is the dynamic range as well as the shadow noise, the low-level shadow noise.
In the pre-show, I mentioned that I went from a D2X to a D700, and I noticed a big jump. And, the noise is much, much better, but also the dynamic range is much better, and the D800 is even better. I think it's bigger difference on the dynamic range between the D800 and 700 than it is on the noise. I think the 800 is better in noise, but it's even more better. Or it's even whatever the term there is in the dynamic range. Now you mentioned you have the E.
The E, yeah. And
I don't know, people who aren't Nikon fans, or even if you are, you may not know that there's a D800 and a D800E. Do you have both or just the E?
Just the E.
So can you tell us real quick why you chose the E, and maybe a quick, for somebody who isn't familiar with that, what the differences are?
So the reason why I chose the E is because it's what was available. So a friend of mine, or photography acquaintance of mine, had a client who, by some stroke of dumb luck, about May or June of last year, got 2 different D800Es delivered to his house on the same day. And so he had one to sell, and this guy was really nice enough to sell it to me at cost. So he wasn't going to make any money, which a lot of people are trying to buy multiple buys and selling them for a profit. He sold to me at the sticker price plus just shipping, and so it was a very, very nice thing. So I got the D800E, and it's about the anti-aliasing filter. So anti-aliasing is if you have, I'm not an expert on it, but basically if you have a consistent pattern, you may get these colorful these colorful areas that will show up in your file. And so a lot of camera buyers have this anti-aliasing filter in there to basically get rid of those colorful areas when you have, suppose you're shooting a curtain which has a very consistent pattern, you might get this aliasing going on.
Yeah,
so
you've probably, if you've, you may have seen it like on the back of your camera sometimes when you're shooting, if you don't have a D800, you may have seen it on the back of your camera when you shot something and said, oh, that looks weird, a weird pattern on somebody's shirt, on curtains like you mentioned, that kind of thing. And there's a filter inside of most cameras that filter that out. But the D800E removes it, and the benefit is, at least in theory, and I think in practice, is sharper images, right? More resolution?
It's slightly sharper. I'm not sure after you really take an image through the processing stage and sharpen it appropriately, you're really going to notice much of a difference. But I think for the D800E, it's actually, the filter's still in there, but they apply some sort of filter or some sort of a mechanism that kind of then, I don't really understand the mechanics behind it all, but basically does away with it. I'm not sure why they did it that way instead of just removing it, but it's still there with some other mechanism afterwards that kind of reduces or gets rid of that anti-aliasing effect, I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I read about it at some point, but I forgot all the different details.
Now, do you shoot with a tripod?
99% of the time, yeah. So okay. I'd say 99% of my images have a tripod. Once in a while I can handhold, but almost all of them, I think, there's probably just a couple on my website that don't. I'd say 5 at most.
And you mentioned the 16-34, 35,
35.
And f4 lens. Is that your main landscape lens?
That's the main landscape lens, yes.
One of the things when I switched from a D2X to D700, I went from crop to full frame. And my crop sensor go-to landscape lens was a 12-24.
Yeah.
Which on a crop sensor made it, 18 to 36 or something like that. So I may have done the math there wrong, but I think that's
no, that's right.
1836. Yeah. Right. So that's not going to be very helpful now on my full frame. So I was looking at the whole in Nikon. There's something called the Holy Trinity, which is I think was it 16 to 24, 24 to 70, 70 to 200. I think maybe it's 14 to 24.
I think it's a 16, maybe the 16 to 35, and then the 24 to 70, then 70 to 200. Yeah, I believe that's the Trinity.
I was thinking it was 14 to 24, 2.8.
Oh, the 14 to 24 is phenomenal. That's on my dream list of
yeah, so
that thing is a beast.
I was thinking, it is, and it's really expensive. All 3 in the Holy Trinity are very expensive. But I was thinking about getting the 16 to 35. How do you like that lens?
I mean, I like it. It's worked very well to me at certain settings. It's pretty sharp, very sharp in my book. F8 is amazing. I typically don't go any shallower than F8 because you run into too shallow of a depth of field. Between F8 and F11, that's where most of my photography is taken. In a pinch, I'll do F16, but I really noticed, not to get overly technical, but the diffraction really becomes noticeable at F16 and above. Right. And so you lose. I have this camera which has amazing resolving properties, or it can resolve fine detail, and I kind of want to shoot where I can capture as much of that detail as possible. So F16 is in a pinch if I really need it. I try to stay between F8 and F11, and that may mean blending, doing depth of field blends if my objects are static. And that's a whole other technical discussion, which is fine to have. But I try to really come back with the highest quality RAW files I can have, and that includes sharpness. So I think the 16 is a really good lens. I think it can be a little soft in the corners at certain settings. I've heard a couple people getting bad lenses, like individual lenses, which they have to kind of send back and get repaired, or maybe get a replacement lens. But overall, it's been really good. I wish it was 2.8. That'd be fantastic. But the only other downside is there's a pretty noticeable barrel distortion, which is a really common profile, so you can fix it pretty easily. But in a lot of landscape work, I don't have these flat lines where that barrel distortion is really going to work or be noticeable, I mean. And so, but if it were, it's pretty fixable in either aperture, or not aperture, but Lightroom or Photoshop. Yeah. But I like the lens. It's been really good.
You know, a lot of people, a lot of people may have heard that if you stop down your lens, if you open your lens up too much, if you go to f2.8, you go to the maximum openness, or lowest f-stop, whatever that is, on your lens, that it can be a little bit soft sometimes. So stopping it down a stop adds a little bit of sharpness to it. But like you just mentioned, the diffraction, or whatever they call that, if you stop it down too much, the two ends of the extreme, stopping down too much or wide open, is the weakness of a lens. And most people don't maybe not know about the upside too. And for most landscape photographers, you're not going to shoot a whole lot at 2.8. You're going to be shooting more, like you said, f8 or somewhere in that range, or a little bit higher. Now the stacking thing, I heard that about that in macro. And if you're not familiar with that on the macro side out there in chat or listening later, is if you take macro, you got and you can't see me because I'm focused on Michael, but I'm showing Michael, and I know he knows what I'm talking about. But you got very, very little depth of field, so only a little bit is in focus. And then you take multiple shots with multiple focal points, and you blend them all together in Photoshop. But you sometimes do that with landscape shots too, where you may take multiple shots and using different focus points where you're focusing.
Absolutely. It's the best time to use that is when you have a very static scene, which means there's nothing moving.
Right.
Some of these shots from the southwest with the sandstone lines, obviously they're not going to move. Issue for me as a Northwest photographer is that there's often foliage. So in the gorge, there's tons of foliage blowing around. I love shooting mountain meadows, so the meadows are typically blowing around. In this scene, there's blowing foreground bear grass, or not bear grass, but rabbit brush, whatever it's called. And so typically, it's a challenge to kind of really try to render that, because since things are moving, if you take more than one exposure, they're not going to align in the final product. And so you need it's a juggling act, and a lot of times it doesn't work. You may try it and it just doesn't work. And in that case, I would go to f16 and try to get it all in one shot as much as possible.
Okay.
And obviously for this, the Sunstar was shot at f22, and the other part of the scene was shot at a lower, wider aperture for sure. This is a sunrise at Painted Hills in Oregon, which is a rather famous spot. The hills themselves are kind of in the shadow area. This is typically shot at sunset, or better shot at sunset. But we did get a little bit of color that morning, and the Sunstar kind of came out once the sun rose, and it lit up the foreground brush, and just kind of worked for me, I guess.
Yeah, I love the you have a few here that I picked that have that sunspot in it, and it's just gorgeous. Do you do any of these HDR?
No HDR, no, but not like a program or a software which is HDR, like Photomatix or anything like that. But technically, it is HDR. So even the D800 with its amazing dynamic range would not be able to capture this entire range of this bright sun coming over the horizon with the shadow area, which is where the hills are in the center of the photograph. We either lose all the detail in the bright areas, it would be overblown, or the shadow area would go to dark. So it is also a blend of different exposures as well. And I guess once you blend those exposures together, technically it's HDR.
So you're taking multiple shots with this, and then you're doing it manually?
Yeah.
So it's HDR without using the software.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I just find, I mean, I've fooled around with Photomatix, but I really haven't been too pleased with the results. And maybe if I stuck with it, I can kind of get it to look more natural. But I just prefer to do it by manually. Another thing that really kind of helps out for this as well is to give a plug to Tony Kuiper. He has these luminosity masks, which you can select different luminous values from your dark, dark, darks to your brightest whites. And you can kind of then only make adjustments in post, which only affect those areas of the photograph. And that's something that I think a lot of landscape photographers, I think most of my friends who are photographers use them. And Tony Kuiper is his name, Kuiper. And he's done I mean, those actions are very, very powerful. And if you use them correctly, they can be just fantastic.
So those are Photoshop actions?
I think they're only for Photoshop, yeah.
Okay.
So
we had a question out in chat about the sunspot, and they're saying it's almost too perfect. Is that a real sunspot? And I think the reason it looks so good like that is you probably stop down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it gives it that nice rays of light when you stop down like that. Did you mention this is f/16 or something like that?
I believe this is probably f/22.
F/22.
I probably went all the way down, my smallest aperture.
Okay.
So f/22.
I had this one up for a while, and we got off on our subject, but I had this one up. I love this shot here with the sun coming through. And
same sort of deal.
Yeah, when I first looked at this one, I thought, there might be some HDR going on here. But it's the same deal that you talked about earlier where you're doing the blend?
Yeah.
Okay.
So same sort of deal. The sun star was shot separately. It's its own file. And that file also contains much of the sky and I think much of the background mountainous area, which is kind of in the background there.
Yeah.
The tree itself is a depth of field blend because it was so close to my camera lens that even at f11, if I wanted to focus on that nearest portion of the tree or the branch, it would even at f11 or f16 wasn't going to get that in focus area to get all the way back through the frame. So it's I think a 2-shot depth of field blend with a 1 shot for the star, and then just some exposure work in post, raising the exposure of the branch itself, and just letting that sun star peek over that little shoulder there.
Wow.
But no, not HDR.
Yeah. So you not only shots for the exposure, but also shots for the focus.
Yeah.
The other thing about this shot is not that you need this because the star does bring you right. I mean, not the star. The sun. Well, the sun is a star. The sun. The sun rays bring you your eye right to it. But the framing of the wood that comes in the upper right-hand corner brings you down to that to begin with. The framing is good there too. And then I find myself just looking around because you got so much detail in the tree itself. Mm-hmm. After my eye goes straight to the sunspot, I then start to move around the image and looking at all the different parts of the tree because of all the detail that's in there. I love the shot. And again, I wish I can display this one at full resolution so you can see it out there in chat. But all of his shots, you should go to his website and see these things because it's just amazing.
Thanks.
Yep. So I'm going to flip around through a few more here. This is one where I guess you're camping somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this is one of every summer my buddies, some old climbing buddies and I get together and do a trip. And this is up in Washington, the Cascades. And they were getting ready for bed, kind of turn in, and I just kind of put the camera up and just took kind of like a quick shot. Really didn't think much of it, but it kind of worked out pretty well. Just some stars poking through. Again, this is twilight, and this actually may be one single file. And I may have double processed it, but this is probably just one shot.
Okay.
and they're in the tent, and that was pretty close to the location where that last photo with the tree and the sun star was taken, probably just about 50 yards away. Same trip.
Yeah, and then I was going through some of your shots, and this is a scene that I might have just walked right past.
Yeah.
And this is where your eye is, you've got the eye, you know where to stop. And this is getting at a different angle, because, when you're walking through this, you're not walking through at this angle. You had to get down. There's scenes, this scene could be near my house. Although the water would probably be browner because we don't have nice clear water here. But there's you don't have to go to the gorgeous places that you have access to get your landscape shots. There's shots all around, and the angle that you shot at here with the leaves that are, there with all the color, and then the background with the water and the trees. That's just a gorgeous shot, and it's something that could be in any of our neighborhoods, not in the woods in our neighborhood.
Did you place any of those leaves there, or is that where you found them?
That's the way I found them. That's a great question. I kind of ribbed some guys about placing leaves. I very rarely will place anything. For whatever reason, I'm fine with using post-processing to kind of blend different exposures and different depths of field and kind of bring up shadows and reduce highlights to compress the tonal range. But for whatever reason, I can't bring myself to get around to really placing leaves. But I'm fine. I mean, it's to each his own. But those leaves were there as I found them. And yeah, so I didn't place these leaves, no. Although I know about, you hear about people bringing garbage bags and collecting leaves on the trail to kind of dump on the state. But I'm not trying to sound like I'm against placing leaves.
That one I haven't heard, but I do know people do move the leaves, yes.
Yeah, they move the leaves. So, no, that's how it was found. Good question.
And then here's another one of the sunspots I got. Maybe I might have favored too many of your sunspots. Yeah. But I love the green. This is another one of those scenes that, and you just, I would have walked right, if I'd have been walking with you, I'd have probably walked right past this. I'd have said, oh, look at the nice sun. That's nice. But this is a scene that, the light and just all the green just makes it, a really nice shot.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, this is again in the Columbia River Gorge, and it's amazingly green, and it's just a fantastic place to be in the spring. And the vine maples, which are the trees you kind of see angling in, are moss-laden, moss-covered, and I always want to get a good vine maple shot. And so when I saw this grove, and with the clouds are kind of passing again. This is another shot, 2 shots together, same day, just a couple minutes apart. We had sunny skies, and we have a cloud would roll in, and then sunny skies again. So the conditions were perfect. So what I could do is take 1 shot for the sun star, and then 2 minutes later the clouds would roll over. And so when the clouds roll over, all that detail, there's not such high contrast in the forest. So you can take a second shot when there's not as much contrast from a strong sun, and you can just kind of in post bring them together. And that's just
very nice.
You can get this at 1 shot. Well, not really one shot. The D800E came close. I took a second one, which I think is on my website as well, which I actually prefer better. And I can use 1 file to get it, but it was there's a lot of it just wasn't really as crisp as this file is as well, if that makes sense. So it's better to basically take 1 exposure when it's sunny out, wait for the cloud to roll over, and then take a second exposure with that.
Okay. Now you're doing sometimes the multiple exposure and then blending certain parts of them together. Do you also ever use any ND filters or graduated ND filters?
I used to up until a couple of years ago that I stopped. I find I have a lot more control over things when I can just take multiple exposures, or even you can double process the same RAW file and then just blend those together manually afterwards. The selection tools are really, really good nowadays. You can kind of really blend pretty well.
And one of the things I've heard about the D800 is you can push those files a little bit more in post-processing than some of the previous files.
Yeah.
They have a little bit more latitude there. So like a shot like this one where we have the water flowing, to get the slower shutter speed that causes that silk-looking water like that. Is it just you were able to stop down enough and the light was low enough that you're able to do that? Because sometimes if you're doing this in the middle of the day, the only way to get a slow enough shutter speed is an ND filter.
Yeah. Well, I do have a polarizer, and the polarizer is worth 2 stops of reduced light. So that's going to help out in this situation. So you can polarize. That's 2 additional stops down. And then this is in shadow. The foreground scene is completely in shadow. The sun is gone behind the mountain at that point. And so all you really need is about an exposure time of maybe a second, which isn't that long.
Well, that's not long at all.
Yeah. And, you know, it's possible I would have maybe gone to a smaller aperture as well to get the water to kind of be a little more glassy as well.
Yeah, no, I love that glassiness to the water, like this next shot where you have the water flow coming, and it you know it creates a silkness to the a silk look to the water.
Yeah. Yep. And there's a preference, like, you know, photographers have different preference for the silky look, or maybe using a little bit of a faster shutter speed, you can kind of like get a blend with some more details involved. And in creeks, I kind of like that with more detail in my whitewater. For this falls, this is called Emerald Falls in the gorge. It just kind of goes to this silky look pretty quickly once you get a little, once your shutter speeds increase. But in creek scenes, I really focus on trying to find the correct shutter speed to give me enough detail, but also portray the sense of motion. Mm-hmm. And then another hint for creek scenes is if you get that shutter speed, what you want, don't take just one exposure for those, for the creek. Take several, because the water moves and every single exposure is going to be different. So I may take 15 exposures of just one creek and look at the different variations in the water pattern and pick the one that's most aesthetically pleasing to myself, and then kind of use that. Yeah. So I think a lot of people may take one shot and say, oh, it's good enough, and go. But if you stick around and have some patience, you can kind of take several more exposures, and one of those is going to be probably more pleasing than the other ones.
That's a good tip. So now this next shot, I look at this and I look at it 2 different ways. I think this is either like 3 inches high, and you've shot it in a way that makes it look big, or it's really, you know, 50 feet high, the waterfall that is. It's probably more like, I can't decide which one it is.
Yeah, it's probably maybe 12 to 16 inches high, maybe 2 feet high. It's pretty small. Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is actually, even though the shot kind of worked in the end, this is a time when I blew it. This is a time where I actually was there, prepared. I found a comp I liked, and I was shooting in the other direction. And there's just so much clouds on the peak that I was shooting that I sat on my comp and sat on my comp and sat on my comp, hoping there'd be some sort of something that's going to happen. In the end, it didn't, but the whole time I'm waiting, I'm looking over at this light kind of developing in the clouds and the kind of the fog and the around the mountains, kind of wrapping around the mountains. And at the last second, I kind of left my spot and shot this. And, you know, I wish I would have kind of maybe left my original comp earlier, and kind of was able to find something that maybe could have even been a little bit better as well. So it's a nice shot, but in my eyes, I kind of feel like I kind of blew one there. You know?
I don't know, because I went back and I like the shot. I went back and forth on, is that thing really tall, or is that thing like 12 inch, you know, a few inches high? And that's, so you're saying what, 12 inches or maybe 2 feet at the most?
Could be 2 feet. So if you look, there should be, I think there's a paintbrush, a red paintbrush flower to the right. If you follow the line of the falls, if you continue that diagonal, you know, from the top of the falls up towards the right side of the screen, I think there's one paintbrush flower. And so if you're familiar with paintbrush, it's a wildflower, which is pretty common to a lot of areas. And that, if you know what paintbrush is, that can give you some sense of scale.
Okay.
Well, I mean, this looks like you're standing way up, like above in a mountain, and the grass almost looks like it's a forest. Oh. I mean, you could see this both ways.
Yeah.
I mean, this does not look like a 2-foot falls. Looks like it's a 200-foot falls.
As soon as you fool your eyes with it, it becomes difficult to, you know, to get your eyes back on track and realize what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're actually coming up on the hour now. So what are you planning for the rest of 2013? Anything? I know you got a trip planned. You know, what's up for Michael next?
So next is going to be spending the last or third week in March down in, like I said, Las Vegas. Actually, not Las Vegas, but Valley of Fire, and then hopefully some newer location in Utah somewhere, someplace I haven't shot before. And then we're going to go back to Whitefish, Montana, so I can kind of spend some time in Glacier National Park. So the last 2 summers, my family and I have spent a lot of time in Glacier, just camping, as well as renting a place to stay in Whitefish to kind of have that family time. We're going to go back for 1 more year at least, and then hopefully come back in time for the wildflower season on Mount Rainier, and then, you know, and then who knows what? Who knows? I would love to get up to the Canadian Rockies in winter to kind of get on those frozen lakes and kind of capture some of those winter scenes, which I've kind of I've been kind of wanting. So we'll see if that happens.
You know, we'll post in the show notes where you can go and see Michael's photos. He's got both. He's got a web page where he's got them. You can buy.
He's got a website. He's got Flickr, 500 pics, Google Plus, SmugMug, Facebook. He's everywhere.
And we'll have all those links in the show notes. And I believe on your SmugMug site, which is that your main site? Your SmugMug.
That's
site?
my main website. Yeah.
You can actually purchase some of these photos, and you're talking about going and for the ice and for this the snow. Where was this one at?
So this is in Peru. Okay. So this is this was taken 2004 when I was still doing a lot of climbing, and there's a mountain called Apamayo, which is a very famous and very beautiful mountain in Peru. And I teamed up with this guy from Austria who was a phenomenal climber, very fit, way fitter than I am. And we made this. We only had 4 days. We tried to get this expedition or this trip done in 4 days, and it didn't really pan out, but it was a hell of an experience. So this is on a very broken section of glacier as we're heading back down from what's called Cole Camp, which is the high camp before you summit Alpamayo. And we had climbed this section in the night, this section the morning before, and it was probably the closest I came to ever really truly dying on a mountain.
Yeah, it doesn't look that safe.
That's not super safe. That bridge is very solid, though, that I'm standing on. That was pretty safe. But in the dark, it's kind of really hard to know what's so solid and what's not solid. And that's why you're roped up. If one guy falls in, the other person can hopefully self-arrest, and you can either rescue yourself or you can set up a rescue system. But anyway, we had crossed this bridge, and I was trailing at that point, and he had crossed first, and I went over it. And we knew it was kind of dicey. And I got to the other side, and all of a sudden we heard this just immense rumble, and just the whole bridge collapsed. And it was a big bridge, and so it would have taken probably both of us with them. It would not have been pretty.
See, that's where I say, hey, Tim, go stand down on that thing. Let me take a picture of you.
Thanks.
I'll stand over here where it's safe.
Yeah.
Safer.
Yeah, safer.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was one of those things where we didn't get to the top, but it's a really memorable experience nonetheless, not just because of the bridge collapsing, but just being right there. That's me at Cole Camp. This is taken by the guy David. I probably should give him the photo credit. But that's up a mile, and the route kind of goes kind of left of center of the face there. It's about 55 degrees of snow and ice, and it's a very, very famous climb in the Peruvian Andes, and I wish I could have completed it, but it wasn't in the cards.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. So when you're doing the climb, not only are you carrying all your climbing gear, but you're carrying photo gear, a camera and tripod too?
On this one, I did not. This was not taken with a tripod or even an SLR, because of us we had limited time. So usually you need about 6 days or more, because you want some days to at least acclimatize. And we pushed pretty hard. We had hiked the first day about 14 miles. We gained 4,000 feet, which at altitude is that's a pretty long day. And then the next day we're going to skip a middle camp and get to the Cole Camp here, and then go for the summit. But the next day, weather moved in, so we can only get to the middle camp. And then our ballsy plan was to, on summit day, skip high camp, which is where I'm standing, and go for the summit. We got lost a little bit on the glacier, which took us a lot of time to kind of wind our way through the glacier up to this point. And we just ran out of time. And actually, this was a very brief window of clearing, and clouds rolled back in, and visibility dropped really quickly. So. And then we kind of went in and out of visibility for the next couple hours. So, and then we had to go home. This is our last day. So I hiked down, and the next day I was able to reach town again. So
now this next shot is more my speed.
Yeah. So,
I don't like heights. This one is more me.
Yeah. So that is the best pair of boots I've ever worn. I feel like I wish I would have kept them. So this is the last day of, my wife and I did a 2-person expedition to Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in South America. It's just under 23,000 feet. And this is at the tail end of trekking in the Himalayas, moving to South America, trekking in South America, doing some of the climbs like Alpamayo. And then to cap it all off, for the last couple of weeks of our whole trip in South America, we went to Aconcagua to climb it, and we were doing really well. It takes about 11 to 14 days to climb the mountain. It's very high. We had to acclimatize and carry loads up the mountain. And we were day 11, and we were going to push the high camp, and we were feeling good. We weren't mountain sick. We've seen a lot of people be mountain sick, which means they're altitude sickness. And we've heard some scary stories about just people really not looking very good. Same thing happens in the Himalayas when you trek. But we get to the high camp. We're day 11 of 13 or 14 days we budgeted. And so again, we didn't have a ton of time. And the viento blanco moved through, which is the white wind, and basically ripped our zipper open and shoved about 3 or 4 inches of snow into our tent. Ooh. There's no way to summit, and so we had to kind of bag it and go all the way back down to base camp. And by that point, we were pretty much done. Yeah. So the story about the boots are, these are the boots that I wore through all the different treks in the Himalayas, Patagonia, Bolivia, Aconcagua, and the toes were just shot.
You definitely got your money's worth out of those shoes.
I did.
Yeah, you did. So, Michael, where can we'll put these in show notes, but for people listening who aren't going to go to the show notes, where can people find you? What's your website?
So the website is www.michaelbollino.com. So just one name, Michael Bollino, runningtogether.com. And I'm sure if you do a Google search, it should pop up as well pretty quickly. But yeah, you can, and feel free out there if you want to drop me a question. I'm pretty good about answering questions for people. If you want to know any other information or about how a certain photograph was captured, one thing I like to do is kind of share some information. That's a screenshot of my website.
Oh. Yeah, I'm pulling up your website now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So feel free to, there should be a contact link, and just feel free to send me a quick email, and I would love to answer some questions if you want.
Oh yeah, and that blue one just came up on your website. That one is so much. You got to go to the website just to see these photos, because they're so much more gorgeous when you can see them in the way Michael's showing them on his website than what I can stream here, because if I can't stream it too high of a stream or else people couldn't watch. And down below the photos is a link to some of those places, Google Plus, the Flickr, the 500px, and the Facebook. So you can get them right there. We'll also have them in the show notes. But that was the trouble, Michael, when I was going through the shots. It was, I want this one. I want this one. Because I was picking the shots for the show tonight. And I got to tell myself, all right, I can't show 100 shots. I got to limit this to something. There was just one after another of just gorgeous shots. So I had to sit here and let them play through a few times and watch them to pick out the ones I wanted to pick out. There were so many good ones.
No, thanks for the kind words, Mike.
Yeah, just great work. And anybody out in chat, as we start to close here, if you have any questions that I missed, feel free to let me know. So I did have. I wanted to show this. I often talk about, this is getting a little bit off subject from Michael as we go to the ending here, but I often talk about crash plan and backing up your photos and having an offsite backup solution. So this morning I woke up 100% backed up on my crash plan thing. That's the geeky side of me. Loved waking up this morning to see that. So if you have not got an offsite solution, and we don't have any kind of affiliate or anything with that, with Crash Plan, think about using Crash Plan or Carbonite or Backblaze or something like that as a way to get your stuff backed up. You've got to, you want an offsite backup solution, because anything you have in your house won't protect you from theft. Somebody breaking in your house, stealing it, from fire, flood, whatever you're going to have. So you need a local backup and offsite. And I'm going to preach that for now to eternity. Not every show, but for a long time, because I want to make sure that no one who listens to the show can ever come back and say,
you didn't tell me.
You didn't tell me. And also I want to mention two of our. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say I use Crash Plan as well, so it's great.
Yeah. No, I love it
as well.
I love it. I want to mention two of our past guests as we go to close. Rachel Brinke, who we've had on the show a number of times, just amazing photographer, amazing person, super, super busy, always driven. Was recently, she's already got 18,000 or something likes, almost 19,000 on her Facebook page. She was recently on Creative Live. She did a show on Creative Live and about to do another one. And she was out there doing a show with Jasmine Starr on Creative Live. So congratulations to Rachel Brinke, who's out there, keeping things going. And then another one who's Stacy Jensen, who every month gives, and I got Gina, I need to do that. Our last month guest, winner in our Facebook photo challenge was Gina Perry, who's out there in chat right now. And in addition to the book she won that I mentioned earlier from Nicole Young, she wins a $25 credit to Stacy Jensen's Actions, who is a former guest on the show. And every month, Stacy Jensen gives out a $25 credit to whoever wins the Facebook challenge. So I'll get in touch with you, Gina, about that one. And she's already up to almost 11,000 likes. She's doing a great job too. So great job, guys. Let me get us set up for the next shot. And with that, I'm sorry, I'm setting stuff up here. Where is this? There we go. All right, now we're back to the normal shot for everybody. We'll put the links out to Michael that we just mentioned out in the show notes. We'll have some of these, photos that are will be in a little slideshow, low resolution on the site too. And you make sure you go out and check Michael's stuff and follow him on Google Plus or Facebook so you can see where he posts all the time, when he's taking new shots, and you can go out there and see the new ones that come up and keep track of what Michael's doing. Michael, we thank you for coming out this week. I've been following you for a while, and I'm glad we got you on the show. I love looking at your shots. Yeah,
well, thanks for having me on, Mike. Seriously, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and when you go out and do another big trip, or at some point in time, I'd love to have you back on, because landscape is one of the things I love to shoot landscape. And I can learn a lot I learn a lot just looking at your photos and trying to figure out what's going on, but talking to you, I learn a lot too.
Great. Yeah, anytime, just give me an email, and I would love to come back.
All right. Well, yep. Thank you. And if you have, if out there in chat, if you want to get in touch with Tim or I, or any of our past guests, we can pass on any questions. Send us an email at podcast@jpeg2RAW.com. And we'll get those passed on. If you have a guest suggestion or a suggestion about the show, let us know. And like I mentioned at the first part of the show, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, come and join us. We'd love to have you as part of that. I did get a question, Tim, recently about Kathleen. And Michael, we did have a third member of our team here, was Kathleen Bowie. And I got a question, how's Kathleen doing? What's going on with Kathleen? Kathleen's doing about the same. I think probably a little bit better. Kathleen is pregnant with her third child, Michael. So nothing, wrong with her. She's just pregnant for her third child.
Nothing wrong.
Unfortunately, well, when I first talking about it, it sounded like she was in a car accident or something.
Yes.
Unfortunately, she's having morning sickness that lasts beyond the morning. Hopefully, she's getting better. I talked to her last night, and the reality is that with having 3 young children, because her other 2 are fairly young too, that the likelihood of her coming back on a full-time basis anytime soon, and when I say soon, I mean years, is probably unlikely. So, we may have her from time to time come back on as a special co-host, but I think for the most part it's going to be Tim and I and whoever else we pick up eventually as a third co-host. And that's it. That's all I have. I need to get a closing, Tim. You
yes, I was just going to say that was a very abrupt closing.
So let's try that again. What's a good closing?
I don't know. We're going to have to come up with something.
Yeah, and
make that a contest.
Yeah, help me with the closing. I 76 shows. I listen
to enough podcasts during the week. You'd think I'd know how to close a show. 76
shows. You think I'd have a better closing? I need Seth, who's out in chat, or Jeff, or Jeannie, or Gina, to give me a help and let me know in the Facebook group.
I'm just a typist here.
It's got to be something that's going to fit me. I'm not going to get up and do the, what is that, the Gangnam Style dance. I'm not going to get up and do that.
Come on, you look like Psy.
Yeah.
Until next time. Yeah, I have to work on it, Seth. Those are some good ideas. But anyway, until next time.
Same JPEG time, same JPEG channel. I can't even say it.
Yeah.
The Harlem Shake.
Not going to do any of those. But guys out in chat, thank you for coming. we'll go ahead and end the live show now.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah. Good night.